We know that regulatory sandboxes have existed to allow the regulators and to allow new innovations to be tested within a controlled environment. And, in addition to a regulatory sandbox, there's also been a concept of a technical sandbox, where you can actually test your solution in a controlled and a safe testing bed. And working with Yasmeen over the past couple of years, Fintech Galaxy has developed both actually a technical sandbox and digitized their existing regulatory sandbox. And Yasmeen, in your capacity as the director of the FIU, the Fintech and Innovation Unit, I'd love to hear from you how you balance the regulations and innovation, and how you use that to really shape the innovation in Fintech.
Thank you very much, Abe. I'd like to start by welcoming all our distinguished guests, Your Excellencies. I'd like to thank our hosts. It's a great pleasure to be participating in this outstanding event. Now, Abe, when we speak of innovation, innovation is really all about exploring, developing, testing, making mistakes, addressing those mistakes, and doing all that very, very fast. In order for innovators to be successful, they require certain, support. Some of the most important include an enabling environment, both from public and private stakeholders from one end. They require enabling regulations, access to data, talent, capital, amongst other supportive elements. Now, in this new technology-driven era, our role as financial regulators has really evolved. In the past, we were merely just focused on supervising and regulating. However, this new era has enforced that we adopt a new role, which is to enable innovation within financial services to ensure that our financial service industries and sectors remain progressive and to meet the changing demands and expectations of the general market and customers. So as regulators today, we have to be very vigilant of the innovative products and solutions. We have to be very proactive in encouraging collaboration between fintech innovators and financial institutions and other relevant stakeholders. And then most importantly, we have to also be able to design enabling regulations that will foster innovation without compromising the financial integrity and without compromising consumer protection. Regulatory sandboxes has really been a game changer for fostering innovation within financial services sector. These regulatory testing environments have really helped to overcome a number of hurdles and challenges that are faced today by both regulators from one end and innovators from a different angle. When we speak of like the regulatory kind of challenges in the face of these innovations, we as regulators are faced with increasingly complex, innovative digital solutions. We don't necessarily comprehend how those solutions work. We don't fully understand how the technology that is powering them is working, and we don't really understand the potential risk implications of these new innovative products and solutions. And that leaves us with a question as to how do we regulate them? What needs to be regulated? We have to be very conscious of not over-regulating, stifling innovation, but at the same time, our core responsibility is to ensure financial integrity and safety and soundness of the financial system. So regulators have really benefited from these regulatory sandboxes. If you like, the act as quasi-laboratories for regulators. So they give us a chance to explore, assess how these innovative products and services are functioning, how they work. They give us a chance to determine the potential risks associated with those innovations. And they give us a chance to think of how to quickly tweak or enhance our regulations, or even issuing new regulatory frameworks, because regulations and policies that have worked in the past may not be relevant going forward. Now, if we speak about the innovators and their kind of perspective, innovators within financial services, they are really, in the form of startups. Now, these startups are not very well versed when it comes to regulations and the regulatory environment in general. At the same time, they're not very sure about the viability of their products and services. So regulatory sandboxes, provide those innovators with a safe, controlled environment to develop their solutions, to test them with real customers within limited scope, all under the supervision of the regulator. So it really helps them to understand the market appetite for their products and solutions. Receive feedback from the market on the viability of their products, allowing them to make necessary changes or enhancements to the products prior to developing them or expanding into the general market. It also provides those innovators a great chance to engage in open dialogue and collaboration with the regulator, to come to understand the regulatory environment, receiving advice and guidance from the regulator, and start preparing for the regulations that will be imposed on them once they graduate and become fully authorized or licensed. The regulatory sandboxes have been a game changer, as I said. I tend to refer to them as a catalyst for innovation within financial services. Since the advent of regulatory sandboxes back in 2015, 2016, there have been numerous successful stories around the globe, and sandboxes are increasing in popularity. Speaking about our experience in Bahrain, we have been amongst the first movers in this area. We launched the first onshore regulatory sandbox in the region back in 2017. It has been a great learning experience, a great learning journey for us as a regulator. We have had a number of successful fintech startups that have been able to graduate from the regulatory sandbox, receive the full authorization from the central bank, and today have expanded their operations not only locally within Bahrain, but regionally as well. In Bahrain, we're also going a step further. You kind of briefly mentioned the digital or technical sandbox. So we're complementing our regulatory sandbox today with what's known as a digital sandbox, and that is to try and encourage more innovation by supporting developers and encouraging more collaboration between those developers and incumbent financial institutions, providing them with data that they will require to test and test their solutions. And I think the experience of regulatory sandboxes within financial services has really set a great scene and example, and I think this model can be successfully replicated in a number of different sectors.
I think actually your last point right there goes very much in line with what His Excellency mentioned earlier, the launch of a regulatory sandbox in ICT. And I think that is really the future where we're headed. Mohammad, I know that DIFC has been undertaking a lot of great initiatives. I know the DIFC also last year launched an open finance sandbox in addition to also the regulatory sandbox. And I'd love to hear also your perspective on how do you see that shaping fintech innovation, and also looking forward, what are some of the things that you feel could be done differently, since the theme is about future by design, in order to catalyze more innovation and to alleviate some of the challenges that exist?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So I think, first of all, there's a lot of regulators in the room, and I'd like to probably request everyone that, and as we're looking into the future, that we cannot regulate the future with regulations of the past. And I was having a similar discussion with some of the local regulators. I mean, that's a challenge that we face. And I think the only solution to that, what we have today, is a sandbox environment. And again, we have an example today as well, another sandbox launch. I think at the DIFC, we launched our sandbox in 2017, which actually gives a testing environment for companies, for startups that are disrupting solutions, they want to provide financial services in a different way, which we're not accustomed to. So I think a sandbox environment is needed to be able to give them a platform where they could try and test. But also from a regulatory perspective, we need to make sure we've got the right measures in place. And I think also, I think one of the mistakes that fintechs make, fintechs usually think going to market is probably, launching a fintech is probably similar to launching an e-commerce platform or any other tech company. And I've spent 7 years of my life with fintech companies, and I keep telling them that providing financial services is way different than any other business. You're dealing with third-party money. This has historically been a highly regulated space and will always be. Now, that does not mean that we stay incumbent. We have to look into the future, and we have to be agile, and we have to come up with innovative ways of regulating them, but making sure we protect our consumers. I think in terms of what the future will be like, I think we would need a little bit more standardization. I think the region is very small. And again, fintechs, I speak on behalf of fintechs. Fintechs face a lot of challenges when they are to expand between markets.
Very true.
If you are based in UAE, how do you expand to Saudi, or how do you expand to Bahrain? And the regulatory frameworks are different. So I think passporting would be ideal, but we do not live in an ideal world. But at least if there's some sort of standardization in terms of regulations, that makes life a lot easier for fintechs. And again, I mean, this is a global challenge. If you look at US has what, about 50+ states, and fintechs have to be regulated in each state separately. It's not easy, it's challenging. But at least in this part of the world, if we can make things easy for them. And also, I think we have to encourage and invite the conventional players, the banks, in financial innovation as well. I think, and the reason I say it, because imagine if a bank is to do banking in metaverse. The regulators would receive that very differently as opposed to a startup trying to create a bank in a metaverse, because the risk appetite is different. So that what it does is actually paves the way for the smaller guys. So hence, we're encouraging corporates as well to innovate and disrupt financial services, because the industry is going to go forward one way or the other, and innovation prevails. And I think from our perspective, we want to make sure that we're at par and we've got the right platform, the right infrastructure. Yeah.
That's incredible, actually. Banking in the metaverse would be interesting. Actually, maybe even more interesting, banking on Asgardia. I mean, that's one way to go as well. I love something that Yasmeen mentioned. You said, you know, why do we regulate? And I know, Brian, you have a very interesting view on this. You know, are we regulating because there is something new being brought to the market, or is it because we're doing something in a new way? Yep. If you could maybe provide some insight on that, but also, I know it was mentioned also by Dr. Abir and many others, with the advent of AI and the use of new technologies, you have, you know, bot judges, bot lawyers, you might even have a bot regulator. So how do you make sure that you maintain the ethics around regulating in an innovative way?
Thanks very much for that, Abe, and also thank you to the audience for allowing me to be here. I think what's really important is to understand who should go into a sandbox and why they should go into a sandbox. So when you look at fintechs, you can broadly break them down into 3 different types of entities. First, you have those that do the same things, same kinds of financial services, but more efficiently using technology. So a digital bank. Digital bank is a bank, but it's more efficient. The second type are those that provide services to financial services, but don't engage in financial services themselves. So for example, Abe's platform, Fintech Galaxy, it's a fintech, but it's not doing financial services or analytics. And the third, and this is where sandboxes are important, are those that do the financial services in a new way. So when we think about this, why should we regulate financial services? Fundamentally, and I think both Yasmeen and Mohammad have touched on this, it's for 2 reasons. There are many others, but 2 main reasons. First, protect the vulnerable. You need to ensure that your grandmother's life savings are not lost because you have entrusted them to somebody who should not be trusted. And the second is encourage efficiency. So fintech, by its nature, using technology, naturally supports the second. But the point of a regulatory sandbox is to acculturate both the regulator and the fintech on how these new business models that they're working, what kinds of risks exist in them, and how should they be mitigated. And in some cases, you may find that actually the new way of doing things is actually the old way of doing things dressed up a little bit. And in that case, then, okay, firms will enter the sandbox, you can identify that there is no real fundamental need to change your regulation, all right, sure. Then they can follow in, and you don't need to put such firms in the sandbox in future. Or you might find, as Yasmeen has said, that there are small tweaks that you need to make so that you take into account the need for technology, the need to deal with specific types of things such as AI and how they are used for this. And so you tweak your regulatory framework to come up with something that addresses the needs while still maintaining the fundamental purpose of your regulation, which is to protect the vulnerable. You don't need to throw away everything and start from scratch if they're not doing something that's completely new. But every so often, you will come across those that are doing something completely new. So for example, open finance in the past was something that is completely new. And for these, you need to create a brand new regulatory framework. So it's very important for regulators when going into this. I think ADGM, we've learned this from our experience as running the first sandbox in the region, is to be very clear about what kinds of outcomes you want to see from firms exiting the sandbox. So having talked about that, I think one clear area that we've seen is the importance of ensuring that you have a proper ethical framework for dealing with the use of artificial intelligence, because that is, to some extent, something genuinely new. The point of something like artificial intelligence is to discriminate. It is to be able to say that you have something that is there are desirable and undesirable characteristics, and to be able to determine where something falls within. That, at its base, that is what artificial intelligence is for, the ability to know something about a system. It is not the act of discrimination that is necessarily wrong. It is what you discriminate on that is important. Financial services exist to be able to discriminate between different types of risks. If somebody is risky, they have a bad credit history, you should not necessarily give them the same kind of loan that you do to somebody who has a good credit history. What is really important, though, is to understand where your sources of discrimination are coming from, why you are discriminating, and make sure that when you have worked these out, what you are doing is in line with these. That's why your ethical framework as a entity is very important, because if you know why you have chosen to discriminate against a certain segment, and you are sticking to that, you will not introduce unintended bias. And I think that's an extremely important point when looking at AI in the future. Ensure that you understand why your AI models are set up the way they are, and make sure that you do not encounter unintended bias.
Thank you so much, Brian. That's very interesting insight. I know we're just about, actually we're out of time, so I want to take a moment to say thank you so much, Brian, Yasmeen, and Mohammad. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our panelists. Thank you.